All the World's a Stage by Shakespeare. All the world's a stage. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail, unwillingly to school, and then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths, and bearded like a pard, jealous in honor, subtle in quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation, even in the cannon's mouth. And then the justice, in fair round belly, with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances. And so he plays his part. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful horse, well saved, a world too wide for his shrunk shank, and his big manly voice, turning again to a childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Last scene of all, that ends this strange eventful history, is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. William Shakespeare is regarded as the greatest writer in the world of English literature. He was an English poet, a dramatist, and an actor. Shakespeare was born and brought up in Stratford-upon-Avon and is often regarded as the Bard of Avon. He is considered as the national poet in England. His works consists of about 38 plays, 154 sonnets, some long narrative poems, and other verses. There is considerable controversy regarding his physical attributes, sexuality, religious beliefs, etc. Some of his famous dramatic tragedies include Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, and King Lear. Shakespeare died on 23rd of April 1616 at the age of 52, survived by his wife and 2 daughters. All the World's a Stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. In the poem All the World's a Stage, Shakespeare compares the entire world to a theatrical stage where all the human beings perform their allotted role given by the god. Every individual has to go through 7 acts that are 7 stages of man's life. This first sentence presents the guiding framework of the poem, the central idea that the world is but a stage where all the men and women enter when they are born and exit at death. However, this play is not a bland, monotonous one, but one with 7 distinct parts that are compartmentalized according to age and the maturity that comes with it. And within each age-defined part, a man shows certain stock qualities and features and undertakes certain worldly responsibilities, which go on to add flesh to the skeleton of their life, which has already been predecided by destiny. Next, this poem goes in detail about each act or stage of life. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms. And then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. At first, the infant, mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, and then the whining schoolboy, with his satchel and shining morning face, creeping like snail unwillingly to school. The first stage in this phase of his life, man appears as a child in the world. As a child, he is a helpless creature. He cries in the arms of his nurse for one reason or the other. He cries and vomits. The second line of the poem illustrates on the first stage where a man is a crying, puking infant assigned to the care of a nurse, unable to look after himself. The next phase of his life, man appears as a child in the world. After this infancy stage, the man then grows into a whining schoolboy, reluctantly holding on to his satchel and unwilling to go to school, which defines the learning phase of a man's life. During the second stage, the man has the brightness of the morning sun, reference to childhood, but the pace of a snail that is creeping. This slow, tiresome pace comes from the lack of unwillingness to fulfill the responsibility of a student and learner, which is common to most young boys. He goes to school with a bag hanging from his shoulder, creeping like a snail. He marches to the school unwillingly. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. And then the lover, sighing like furnace, with a woeful ballad made to his mistress's eyebrow. In the third stanza of his life, a man plays the part of a lover. He grows into a young man, full of desires, ambitions, and dreams. He becomes a romantic young man. He falls in love and sighs like a furnace. he begins to write sad poems to his beloved. He cannot control his sad feelings. The third line draws an allusion to the teenage stage of a man's life, where he dutifully plays the role of an impassioned lover who sighs in love as if he were a furnace. Young love is commonly associated with love letters written by a man to impress his object of love. These love letters are full of passion but often lack weightage, something that Shakespeare has hinted at by mentioning that such ballads, which is an exaggeration to ironically indicate the futility of such young love, are written to the mistress's eyebrow. Choosing eyebrows as the topic of poetry indicates that there is no depth to this love. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. Then a soldier, full of strange oaths and bearded like the pard, jealous in honor, sudden and quick in quarrel, seeking the bubble reputation even in the cannon's mouth. In the fourth stage of his life, man becomes a foul-mouthed soldier who has learned queer words. In this stage, he tries to give himself a formidable look with a beard like a pard. He is emotional and jealous. He quarrels with others for his honor and grace. He hankers after temporary and bubble fame. This fourth line sheds light upon the spirited and aggressive stage of life, jealous in honor, when the young lover evolves into a short-tempered soldier, sudden and quick in quarrel, who dedicates this particular act of his life to chasing the bubble, that is, short-lived reputation of a soldier who lives by the cannon's mouth, the cannon being an allusion to the battle-informed life of a typical soldier. In this stage, the man is buoyed up through strange oaths of loyalty and honor that a country employs to bind its soldiers. The man's facial features also mature during this stage, and he goes on to grow a beard that has been compared to the pard, a leopard's whiskers, indicating the fire that the youth carry, especially when they are fighting for their country as soldiers. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. And then the justice, in fair round belly with good capon lined, with eyes severe and beard of formal cut, full of wise saws and modern instances, and so he plays his part. In the fifth stage of his life, he becomes a judge. He becomes mature and experienced in his thoughts. The heat of youth has completely cooled down and he becomes very realistic. He wishes to grab wealth by foul or fair means. He begins to accept bribe and thus adds much to his material comforts. He becomes ease-loving and therefore becomes fat. his belly becomes round. He eats healthy fowls and chickens presented to him as a bribe. His eyes become severe and he grows the beard of formal cut. The fifth line is where the young impassioned soldier grows into a middle-aged adult who has settled in the professional role of high-ranking judge, which could probably be the reward of having paid his dues as an adept committed soldier. From having a short-tempered demeanor, this once young man has settled into midlife with a fair round belly, which is an allusion to wealth and prosperity. However, there is indication that this wealth and prosperity have not come through honor, and the fire that the man emulated as a soldier, but it is the product of capon, which means bribe. His eyes are no more burning with motivation and drive, but have become severe, having learnt the ways of world, and his beard that once carried leopard whiskers has now been fashioned into a formal professional cut to suit his age and professional role. From being a reluctant schoolboy to a hopeless lover and a spirited soldier, now the man lives a little of wise saws, which translates to old sayings that the neatly applies to modern life as deemed fit by him. The man's maturation into worldly being reaches a climatic point in this fifth stage. The sixth shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved, world too wide, for his shrunk shank and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. The sixth age shifts into the lean and slippered pantaloon, with spectacles on nose and pouch on side. His youthful hose well saved, a world too wide, for his shrunk shank and his big manly voice turning again toward childish treble, pipes and whistles in his sound. Then, in the sixth stage of his life, man grows old. He looks quite ridiculous in his movements. He wears glasses because his eyesight is weak. His shoes become wide for his feet. His voice suffers a change. It becomes a shrill and quivering whistle. In the sixth line of the poem, the man enters the elderly act of life as an old man requiring spectacles to aid his vision made weak with age, with the schoolboy satchel now replaced with a small pouch that is enough to carry all his humble old daily necessities. In this stage, Shakespeare calls the man a slipper-wearing pantaloon, which means a fool, which strikes a contrast with his old role as a judge, where he only dealt with wise sayings. The man's fat belly has been transformed with age into a shrunk frame. His big manly voice that could once be associated with the cannon's mouth has now reduced to childish treble, with his voice interjected with whistles and pipes, indicating shortness of breath. It is through this fifth stage, signifying old age, that Shakespeare has shown how age dissipates the fire of youth and the grandeur amassed through adult life. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sun's teeth, sun's eyes, sun's taste, sun's everything. Last scene of all that ends this strange eventful history is second childishness and mere oblivion. Sun's teeth, sun's eyes, sun's taste, sun's everything. However, in the final stage, the man turns into a child once again. He seems to forget everything. He becomes toothless. His eyesight has weakened and he is deprived of taste. He is ready to leave this world. The final line signifies the final stage of a man's life. That is, when he is on his deathbed, at the fag end of his eventful personal history. Shakespeare has likened the seventh stage to the first stage, calling it a second childishness, for during this last stage of a life, a man becomes senile, encapsulated with oblivion, signifying memory loss. During this time, the man indeed becomes as incapacitated as an infant, having lost his teeth, vision, eyes, and just about everything, as he once was in his nurse's arms.